Chapter 7. Last night had ended too innocently to be my ultimate fantasy. All I had was the promise of another date and a few spine-tingling kisses. It was more than I'd had previously, but my skin felt icky, like I missed something. A frown didn't budge from my lips, and the bright sun from the window did nothing for me except wake me up. The coffee in my room helped as I checked my cotton granny panties and prayed the line wasn't that noticeable. The clock read later than I intended, so I walked out the door. No morning conversation with my mom was also perfect, as my phone was still off and I kept it that way. At the hotel, they let me sit inside until the valet had my SUV, and then bellboys packed my one bag in the back. The cloudless blue of the morning sky lifted my spirits. I poked my tongue into my cheek as I drove. Another date with John might seal the deal. A funeral should have cooled my libido, and John was the man's son. I tapped the steering wheel to the beat of the radio. As I turned my SUV into the church parking lot, bright lights from the streets blinded me. I'd passed so many video cameras that my eyes were dazed. I killed the ignition, a frown on my face. I'd never lived like this. It was still morning and the coffee hadn't kicked in. I ran my hands through my short hair and kept my head down to avoid the flashes of a mob from the gate I had just passed. I sighed. Nothing good happened at funerals. John would be in the procession later, and he'd warned me that he wouldn't spend time with me today. Not until after this was over. I made my way to the front door, though I realized I was early. The glass doors closed behind me, leaving me in a white hallway. A flutter grew in my stomach. I turned right and swore I saw a blonde woman who looked like Victoria float into an adjoining room. I blinked, knowing that was impossible. Denied sex never brought people back to life. I rubbed my eyes. The church was warm. Hopefully, when people arrived, they would blast the air conditioning. I swallowed and felt overheated as I entered the main room. A few mourners sat in the light brown pews, but the place was still pretty empty. Mitch Morgan's casket had so many flower baskets around it. He appeared like a king as he lay in state at the front of the room. This was why John had been in no mood for me last night. If the situation were reversed, I'd be a total mess too. I hugged my stomach and chose instead to go wait in the greeting area for more people. With the scattered amount of guests who milled in the halls, I'd blend better. If I missed seeing John this morning, I'd be fine. Coffee afterward would make up for everything else. With that thought, I turned on my phone. There were a dozen voicemails from my mother. I pursed my lips, flicked it back off, and returned to the bright hall. Though the sun was shining brightly, my arms had goosebumps. It felt like someone was staring at me. I turned around completely, but saw no one. Whatever it was felt familiar, not frightening. Perhaps Mitch had more children than the 3 he raised, and John would meet half-brothers and sisters at his funeral. Not that I wished that on him, but my gut said something was about to happen. Noise outside caught my attention. I folded my arms in front of my black dress as a large group of people walked in. The lights flashed brighter than fireworks on the 4th of July, so Peter and John must have arrived. The explosion in my heart begged to lock eyes with John. I didn't see him, but the surge of hope never wavered. I blinked at Jennifer in a magnificent black gown that could double as a dress for the Academy Awards. Her long black hair, dark eyes, and pale skin made her the star that she was. Mortals did not look like Jennifer Gonzalez. Other people passed by, but I never saw John. The lights were too bright. As shoulders passed in front of me, goosebumps rose on my arms. Then my stare froze as I gazed at the outline of my fairy tale prince. John's light blondish brown hair, blue eyes, and dimples blew every other man out of the water. My lips tingled as I remembered our kiss. I averted my gaze and blended into the crowd that walked into the chapel for the ceremonies. Peter Morgan suddenly appeared at my side. I gazed up at John's brother. My mind didn't register anything at first, but then Peter's words acted like a knife to the bread that was my brain. Consider our contracts canceled at the end of the term. My mouth dropped open. My father's retirement depended on that contract. My fingers felt like ice and my skin grew cold. What? Peter continued past me in the rush and took Jennifer's hand. He acted as if he hadn't just destroyed me. Jennifer, obviously in on the plan, added, "You were never important, Alice. No one knows why you're here." My stomach twisted. Sharp pains poked through my skin. The pair of them walked away in the throng of people. I blinked and could do nothing but stare. I'd come here to pay my respects to the House of Morgan and keep my family safe. Instead, I'd lost my family's contract to sell our produce in supermarkets around the country. My parents were retiring and needed the income. My father was recovering from a heart attack. My brother was leaving the Marines to raise his daughter. The weight of responsibility rested on my shoulders, and my very independence depended on my business skills. This wasn't possible. I folded my freezing hands together. I had to think fast. John's fingers brushed my back. A spark of electricity woke me. "Alice, you look like a ghost. Are you okay?" "Your brother..." My voice trailed off. I shouldn't tell him, not here at the funeral. I pressed my lips together. I gazed at the floor to count the marble tiles. Never mind, we can talk about it later. His warm hands pressed against my back. I turned toward him as he took my hand. Forget what I said last night. Sit next to me and tell me what happened. This wasn't smart. I swallowed. I'd be in the same row with Peter and Jennifer. No real conversation could be had there. Besides, the entire world might see me if I sat next to the President of the United States or the former one. I kept my legs from buckling by locking my knees. I don't think I should. John's hand kept me warm. The blush in his cheeks suggested he was happy to see me. It was something at least. He held his hand on my back as he walked me down the aisle. Tell me what happened. I must be having an out-of-body experience. As I followed him and my hand took his, my mind was a complete blank. Honestly, I couldn't think. This was so strange. My backside sat down before I realized I was exactly where I feared, in front of a president and in the row as part of the family. With those cameras, my mother would definitely see me, and I had no explanation to offer on what happened with John Morgan. Not here. John's hand stayed on mine as we stood up so the former president could pass and get his seat. John's face paled as he stared at a television camera. I didn't know Peter allowed cameras in here. At least he thought about what this looked like, too. Jennifer shook her head at me in disapproval. I refused to cower because of her, and I held my head higher. Your brother is dating an actress. I wouldn't be surprised if the engagement was a television reality show. No, John whispered in my ear, and his warm breath tickled my neck. That wouldn't be fitting for a Morgan. Peter would not sink that low. Then, in the corner of my eye, I swore I saw Victoria again. I rubbed the back of my neck. I squeezed John's hand enough for him to ask, "Are you okay?" To avert my gaze, I brushed my hair behind my ears. Yes, you're right about your brother and trust, by the way. What happened? Vicky would be here if her father was dead, but I didn't believe in ghosts. There was no explanation for what I thought I saw. I touched my forehead. Right now, this isn't about me. Your brother just dropped a bombshell that I'll have to figure out how to handle. John's gaze turned cold as he stared over my head. I followed the direction and saw Peter. Peter's face appeared confused for a split second, but then he nodded at his brother. The Morgan attitude of, they own everything took over. John whispered to me, "Tell me what happened with him the second we escape this. Peter has no right to bully you." Bully was a strong word and untrue. The contract wasn't with John. Peter had every right to walk away, though. My heart constricted at the thought. I'd have to scramble fast to find another client. Then lights blinded me as people gasped. My arms had goosebumps. John's eyes lit up as he gazed at something behind us. The glow of his entire demeanor emanated happiness. I bit my lip. Someone shocking must be here. Then I turned my head around and followed John's stare. His mouth gaped and he took my hand closer to his body. Even Peter's cheeks were rosy with excitement. The people around me blocked whoever everyone stared at. John's fingers laced around mine. I followed the direction of his gaze. The heads finally swayed out of my way and I pressed my free hand against my chest. My entire body went numb. Victoria Morgan walked into the room and made her way down the aisle. Like both her brothers, her cheeks were rosy and her blue eyes shone with life and vitality. I swallowed. Oh my goodness, my best friend was alive. Chapter 8. I flinched and I couldn't quite stop blinking. Victoria and Alice hugged like they were sisters while the entire world watched everything live on television, including whoever intended me or Alice harm. My sister would be a target too. I stood back in thought until Vicky called, "Don't I get a hug? Or are you mad at me?" Without one word, I wrapped my arms around my baby sister, and her soft skin and fresh, clean smell told me she was indeed alive. I hadn't quite believed it. I closed my eyes as a sea of emotions racked my body. Victoria's death had been the hardest part of my life, but it didn't matter now. She was here. Peter coughed. "Let go, John, so I can hug our sister." I stepped out of the way and brushed my hand down Alice's back. I tried to hold her steady because she was shaking like a leaf in a windstorm. Peter and Victoria hugged. Jennifer didn't budge from the first row for a few seconds. Then she trembled as she joined them. Alice tried to slip her hand free, but I kept her close. I glanced down at her and Alice whispered, "This is a family moment, John." Jennifer's eyes watered as she walked over to Victoria and Peter, though Alice braced as the woman glided past them. I shook my head, holding Alice tight. Victoria would want her best friend, and I needed to keep them all safe. Together. Everyone watched through the rolling cameras, and Victoria and Peter stepped out of their hug. She asked, "Is Dad really dead?" "We should have checked your casket." Peter smiled, then stepped aside. I tilted my head. My brother's face read like he had already known that Vicky was alive. There was no shock, not like everyone else. Had Peter known all along? His sister's funeral had been faked, and he'd fallen for that. Their father must have been laughing in his grave at how gullible he'd been. My spine turned ice cold. "You're hurting my hand." Alice twisted her wrist, and I let go. Alice needed to be protected. I turned to her and again placed my hand on her arm. "I'm sorry." "It's fine." She smiled with a warmness that felt like concern. "We all thought Victoria was dead." "You turned into an icicle, John, sweetie. Are you okay?" I gazed over her and stared into the network news camera that was aimed right at my face. "Yes." I looked beyond her and toward a camera that recorded the entire funeral. There was no way I could let Alice leave, not now. She'd be in danger. "Come, help me get the family out of here." Victoria hugged Jennifer as the television actress cried in front of the cameras. At Castle Morgan, the family home that wasn't truly a castle but an estate, they'd be safe. Alice wouldn't like that arrangement. I held her elbow and guided her as I said, "Peter, let's take Vicky to the back room, away from the cameras." Jennifer took Peter's hand and the five of us pushed past my father's casket and out the side door. Alice stayed with me until we were at the exit. I let go so she could enter, but she stepped to the side. I tried to call her back, but she slipped into the crowd. Vicky would be safe with Peter and Jennifer, but Alice wasn't. She had no idea about the danger. I rushed into the crowded room to get her. Walking fast, she'd already reached the front room near the main door, and I called out, "Wait!" Her face was red as she turned around and glanced at the crowd of people around us. "Why did you follow me?" At least she stayed still as I approached. I needed to explain so she'd understand. With my palms up, I tried to sound reasonable. "Don't go." She shook her head, her fingers on the door handle. "What are you doing? You should be with your family right now." I reached out to stop her. "Stay with me." She averted her gaze and looked over my shoulder at the people around us. "Victoria is in there. She'll call me later. Be with your family." The thought of Alice outside alone sent a chill down my entire body. "I can't let you go." Her face turned a deeper shade of red. "John, our date last night was great, but it was just a fantasy. Our worlds are different." As she spoke, a red laser appeared on her face and my mouth dropped. Without a word, I grabbed her and positioned her between my chest and the wall as a bullet crashed through the glass doors right beside us. Alice screamed and then put her palm over her mouth to stop. I covered her head with my arms to block any shattered glass. Shouts sounded behind us. I patted her strawberry-scented hair as her smell helped block out the stench of gunpowder. From both sides of the church foyer, Secret Service came out of the funeral with guns drawn. Alice shook. I held her tight as I called, "Bullet came from outside." At least I hadn't given back my gun or badge yet, as my training was why I wore my weapon. One of the agents had his finger to his ear as he answered, "We have 2 presidents to protect. Our men are en route." Alice trembled in my arms, and I rocked her to keep her calm. This was my fault. No one would get to her. In the security mirror near the entrance, I saw she was pale. "Can I take her to sit down?" One of the men in sunglasses said, "I need to see identification." Her lips shook. "My license is in my purse, John." No one should scare her like this. I'd have to find out who did this. I nodded but held her waist to keep her close as I opened my jacket to reveal my FBI badge. "She's with me." She was almost shot. The men with the guns pointed at us held their weapons higher and let us pass. I took her toward one of the rooms to the back and away from the funeral. Alice stayed in my arms as she followed. She stayed close until I closed a side door. Then she blinked, tried to stand taller, and swallowed. "Who shot at me?" My heart constricted in my chest. I had no idea how much to reveal. I couldn't tell her that this was a threat against me. Could be anyone. She took my bicep in both of her hands. "Did you see a laser on my face? I thought I saw a red light." "Yeah, it's why I dragged you in my arms." Her blue eyes sparkled with curiosity and fear. Her cheeks grew red. "Your skills as an agent were spot on perfect." "No, that wasn't what happened. I was lucky." She shook her head, placed her palm to forehead like she recalled the feel of the red laser, and then closed her eyes. "Wow, I'll be fine. It was probably someone trying to shoot the president." She walked away from me, and I reached out to keep her close. Again, the smell of strawberries played in my throat. "They almost shot you." Her face went pale as she stiffened. "That doesn't make any sense. I'm not the president. I'm no one important." My hands froze on her back as I realized I had to tell her. I gazed into her eyes, wishing I didn't have to reveal my true feelings. "Someone threatened to kill anyone I loved." Her lips parted. "What? I still don't qualify. You don't love me." I let her back away as my spine stiffened while I waited to be knocked out from a punch I had no power to stop. What I said sounded extreme, but my heart knew the truth. I promised myself that no one was going to hurt her because of me. Just now, on national television, we appeared close. She frowned. So someone thinks you love me? It shouldn't be that hard for her to believe that I had feelings. I took a deep breath and steered the conversation back to the point. We need to focus on your safety. Her arms stayed at her sides as her eyes grew wider. What about my family? Alice should think more about herself. I nodded. I'll keep a patrol at your parents' farm. She shook her head like it wasn't enough. They have to be safe. As she wasn't a fan of my family, I wouldn't mention the Morgans had their own security that rivaled any government-run organization. By staying out of sight, no one should go after her parents. I crossed my arms so I wouldn't attach myself to her. You're the primary target. They'll go to them if they can't get to you, but you have to be kept out of sight. That wasn't very reassuring. I don't know how to soften my words or lie to you. My mother pretty much hates your family. Only Alice would spend this long worrying about others and not herself. Her sweetness was more palatable than sugar. I stayed still so she wouldn't jump. Good. Whoever hears her tell that to the world won't bother with her. Right now, I want you with me until I find out who is behind the threats. If you go home, you risk putting your family in danger. It's safer if I put a patrol on the outside while you're with me. Her eyes misted like she might cry, though her pale cheeks stayed dry. She stared at me like I'd set out to hurt her. So I can't go home? I'd have to go slow with her and not push too hard too fast, but no one would get to her on my watch. I have to insist you stay with me. Her lips twitched. You don't have a place, and I'm not staying at Castle Morgan. My brother's home would have state-of-the-art security where no one would get to us, though I'd rather not bunk with Peter. I had my own version of a Morgan home that I never used, and the family service just stocked for me. I don't want to go there either. I won't be your shield from your brother. You need a better plan if I'm staying with you. The hotel? No. I rubbed my chin. Let me think. She crossed her arms too, as if this was an argument she could win. I finalized buying my condo next week. I dropped my arms to my side so I wouldn't close her off. She needed to agree to be with me. I missed the rest of what she said and blinked. She turned to leave. I said, "What?" She turned back around, shook her head, and threw her arms to her sides. Yeah, I do have a life, John. I reached out with both hands and stroked her arms until she calmed down. She gazed up at me and her blue eyes welled with tears. I lowered my head and the scent of strawberries caught in my throat. I spoke softly but firmly as I vowed not to bring up every type of criminal out there and what they might do. If you intend to keep that condo, then you stay with me. We don't know who is after us yet. She licked her lips but shook her head. This is insane. I texted the service my family used to ensure that the house was livable. With Morgan security, it would be the safest place for us. Victoria poked her head into the room I was in with Alice. I saw Peter and Jennifer in the background. Peter had his hands in his pockets, wearing a confused expression as he looked at Alice. Vicky smiled at us and opened her arms. John, Alice, come join us. I've missed you both so much. I had no words. Perhaps my family hadn't heard the shot or they were pretending again. The attack had used a silencer. My sister wasn't a ghost, but I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing either. I took Alice's hand. A spark of fire grew in my belly. No harm could come to Alice because of my stupidity today. I'd find a way to keep her safe until this was over. My gaze returned to Peter. For Victoria, we'd work together. Chapter 9. Alice's entire body shivered. My mind replayed the bullet that blasted through the door and shattered the glass above my head. John had protected me with his massive, muscular chest by shoving me against the wall. I could have died. Everything else right now was a complete blur. John's strong arm was still on my back, and his presence helped steady my fast-paced heartbeat. I rubbed my arms with both hands. This whole day was like a dream come true. Vicky was alive. My childhood crush now held me. A bullet to the head wasn't part of that fantasy. I sighed. The others were talking about what had happened. Perhaps John was wrong about the threat against those he loved. Who knew what happened to Victoria and how she'd escaped to come home? The beat of my heart overshadowed my hearing. I moved closer. Peter Morgan was on the phone with someone and Jennifer stroked Vicky's hair. I stayed near John and asked, Vicky, did your dad kidnap you and keep you from all of us? No. Victoria averted her gaze and looked toward both her brothers. I faked my death. I turned to John as his mouth formed the shape of an O and his eyes grew wider. His hand stayed on my back. John asked, why would you do that? Victoria's face grew white. I had to get away from Dad and everything he'd done. Peter stepped in and blocked her view as he took his sister's hand. What happened between you two? John snorted. You don't know? Peter shook his head and then turned toward us. When it came to our sister, Dad never said anything. You weren't surprised to see Vicky today. John's accusation caused silence all around. I saw him an hour before the funeral. He was surprised then, Vicky explained. He couldn't track you down for a private meeting. I'm sorry. John's fingers pressed into my arm and I turned to take his hand. You don't have to pretend our family is normal, Vicky. Vicky rocked on her feet and hugged her waist. I stepped away, but John's fingers circled the small of my back. If he needed me right now, I'd stay. I needed his strength too, as my mind was a whirlwind and I couldn't quite feel or think. John said, Peter, in many ways you are just like him. You should have told me when we were walking in. Peter stood still. Vicky wanted to surprise you. John's palm heated. Dad would have said that too. He trained me since birth to be who I am. Peter returned his attention to Victoria. I never thought to escape as you did. Vicky's face paled until she almost matched her all-white dress, but then she licked her lips, which had the only trace of pink color. I see my brothers both decided to keep my friends as girlfriends. My face flushed. John and I are just friends. Jennifer rolled her eyes. Sure, and I'm applying to be a nun next week, Alice. We're adults now. You don't have to pretend to be an angel. I clenched my hands. Jennifer was too much. Not everyone is like you, Jenny. Jennifer's nose curled at her old nickname. I bit my lip and then realized I had nothing to be guilty for. One kiss didn't make a relationship. This whole thing was crazy. I had avoided Jennifer for years and would again once we all left this room. Victoria smiled and nodded at how John and I held hands. I approve of you two, if that means anything to either of you. I broke into a laugh. This was a ridiculous conversation. Someone was out to kill someone, me, and they spoke about dating. We were no longer teenagers. John released my hand and my body chilled. He went to the door to speak to security as I glanced at the bulge on his spine that must be his gun. My heart almost stilled as he returned to me, placed his hand on my spine and addressed his brother. Our family reunion needs to be better planned. Peter, ensure that Vicky is kept safe tonight at Castle Morgan. I'll plan our escape from here and see the rest of you tomorrow. I opened my mouth and almost asked, what about me? But clamped my lips together. My mind returned to the fact that I was at a funeral where 2 former U.S. presidents showed up, and the current one had sent his apologies. The shot had to be related to that and not some threat to John. No one was going to kill me or my family. John took my hand and dragged me out the door. My feet stumbled to keep up, but he held me close as he went to a Secret Service agent. He spoke to the man so fast that I turned toward the funeral and tuned out their conversation. Guests sat in the pews of the church talking animatedly. She's alive. It's better than a soap opera. Do you think the old man is dead, or will he wake up later today? Once again, Mitch Morgan set off a firestorm in his family at his own funeral. My mother would say he was stirring trouble from the grave. My face heated. Victoria's funeral had been with a closed casket while Mitch Morgan's waxy face beamed from his silken coffin. He had been the richest man in the world who craved power over the rest of mankind. John told the agents, my father loaned the government money to pay the national debt. This threat is either against the president, me, or my family. I'm heading to a safe house with this woman. Cover us until we make it out of the parking lot. Woman? I said as he turned me on my heel and we headed back where someone had almost killed me. He opened the door and didn't bat an eye. My heart raced. The Secret Service cleared the parking lot to get the presidents out. I'll have your car brought somewhere safe later, but we're heading to my car. John kept my hand in a tight lock, and I shivered as I ran to stay beside him. Don't call me woman, my name is Alice. He stopped at a brand new black Mercedes-Benz with tinted windows. My white SUV on the other end of the lot was dusty from the road, but right now it seemed like a shrine toward home. John opened the passenger door and waved for me to get in. Alice, I didn't mean to offend you. My shoulders curved inward. Part of me wanted to run toward my SUV and take off for the family farm. The other part didn't think that was a good idea. My body shook. I don't feel safe outside right now. He placed his hand on my shoulder and I jerked back at the touch. Then I took a breath and relaxed. John said, I'll protect you, but we can't camp out at the church. Noise behind us caused me to spin on my heel and stare at the Secret Service taking one of the presidents to a limo. I rubbed my arms and turned back to John's strong profile. His 5 o'clock shadow somehow soothed me. Where are we going? He tilted his jaw in the air. I can't tell you. I wasn't a child, and that was not a good answer at all. I shook my head. Why not? John leaned closer, in case someone is listening. What? He opened the door. We're outside, open targets. Alice, please get in. I stared into his blue eyes. Then I slowly nodded and ducked into the passenger seat of his car. John, okay, I'm going to trust you. He locked my door and then swung around the car and joined me. He found his sunglasses and then sped out of the parking lot. I massaged my forehead. Your brother canceled his contract with my family. What? This was a topic I'd have discussed with him over coffee. The original plan sounded like a dream. Peter spoke to me before we all went in. He canceled the contract. It was why I was upset earlier when you came over to me. I have no idea how my parents can retire without that. I have to get to work. The engine purred and I paused. He kept his gaze on the road and clutched the wheel, and we have more important things to discuss. No, I wouldn't think about myself or the bullet that almost lodged itself in my brain. I played with my gold pendant. My parents are my priority. I'll speak to Peter for you. If Peter Morgan changed his mind, then I could breathe easier, but it wasn't wise to hope. There had to be another production company that would buy our oranges up north. The cash crop was a commodity many people around the country craved. If he doesn't change his mind, then I have to go shopping for a new shipper. That's going to be my priority. His hand crossed the seat and squeezed my arm. It's not as important as your life. John Morgan was bringing up things out of my comfort zone. My body tensed as I wrapped my head around what I could handle. I don't have a life if I don't find a new contract. Alice, you have your priorities backwards. I stared out the window. Today was something out of a movie. The funeral, my best friend returned from the dead. Someone almost shooting me, my lost business contract. While my body buzzed with awareness of John, and it was altogether too much to handle. John wasn't being reasonable right now, and my muscles were so tight that I couldn't breathe. Let's not talk anymore for a while. I'm not in the mood. Today has been insane.